Hi, everybody. So
thank you. Nice to see everyone. Hello.
awesome. Thank you for doing it. So I'll start off with reference to an article that I saw posted in last year from Out of Home Today that called out like a time's up for out of home and calling for more female CEOs to be appointed at some of the big out of home companies. This article was particularly pointing out in the US where there's sort of an absence. In Canada, we've done pretty well on the agency side. There's quite a few agency presidents that are women: Dentsu, Omnicom, Kinetic, Novus. But on the supply side, it's pretty rare. And Michele, I think you're probably the only one out of the big out-of-home companies in Canada. And you took the helm in 2007 at OUTFRONT Canada. So tell us a bit about to what you attribute your success and your ascendance into this role.
Thanks, Edith. And just want to say I'm so thrilled to have been asked because our paths have crossed in the past. I know both, Edith and Natalia, and recently Dana, Amanda. I'm so pleased to be in her company these days and delighted that we've worked together. So it's nice. And part of that is on topic because, the opportunity to have an ability to network is really nice. And I'm really pleased that, as women, we're now getting enough of us that we have the ability to network. So I moved into the CEO role at OUTFRONT in Canada in 2017, which was, a real honor. I will note that at that time, Astral's president was a woman, Corinne Moses, and one of the things that was awesome is at that point I went to COMMB exec meeting, and at that point in time there's myself, Corinne, and Roseanne, so we were out numbering the men, so yay, outdoor. So anyway, so I think in terms of how that all happened, certainly at OUTFRONT I was, I think, really fortunate to have a boss, Nick Racki, when I joined, who probably about halfway through, I think I may have been there 5 or 6 years, recognized in me, he thought, an ability to be identified as his successor. So that would have been, let's say 7 or 8 years ago. And, New York had said, we have to do succession planning. Everyone's not got to identify to us if something happened who could step into the role. And he identified me. Not too many people knew that, but I did and he did. And having done that, I think succession planning is critical, and it's something I take to heart at OUTFRONT, and was glad to hear Dana speak to that, because I think that is critical for both men and women. So we then he set aside time and just made sure that he was giving me exposure and experience that would allow me to step into that role, when it became open, and it did through a variety of reasons. So the other thing there that I thought was great was he wasn't someone who had gender lenses. And so one of the things I really want to make sure, I think is important, is just to strip away any kind of gender lens. So he saw ability, he didn't see gender. And it also was good in that he identified someone who wasn't coming up through the traditional channel, which was the sales channel. So in most media companies, the president or CEO is going to come out of sales. I came through research, marketing, and then working together, he gave me responsibility for sales management and then exposure to the other aspects of the business, so real estate and finance. And that meant when it ended up being necessary to step in, I felt equipped to do it. The other thing he did was make sure that I was getting exposure to the senior team at corporate in the US. And there I discovered other kind of mentors, including our CFO. And having the CFO in your camp is very good. And in there, one of the things I would say is, and picking up on Dana's point, I had people offer to be there as a voice or a sounding board. in Canada and the US, and those included our CRO in the US, Clive, and our CFO at that point in the US, Dawn. And I did it, so when people say, feel free to call me, do it, they're not offering, just to be nice. They're offering because they genuinely, I think, see something in you and want to help you. So, I think you need to take advantage of that. And in terms of paying it forward, do the same thing. So I try to make myself available to anyone who wants to talk through career path, and have had a number of individuals in the company, both actually in the US and Canada, reach out to ask, for tips or just sounding boards. So I think, cultivating a culture where there's succession planning, where you're thinking about the future and you're making sure that there's a team coming up behind you is critical. I'm really proud that my executive team in Canada is balanced for gender. I actually have 5 women and 4 men. And within that, I'm as proud of the women as the men, because the men on that team value that balance as well, which is why, it's such a great, strong team. And I think I'll let
That's fantastic. It's a great sort of example of what, like, practical example of what out-of-home companies can do to sort of help ensure that women are part of the pipeline. And along those same lines as what Dana was saying, that succession planning is really important. And you're right, taking people up on that offer for mentoring or advice is really valuable advice. I think sometimes maybe we are a little timid for that in some cases, but if you want to go for it and people put that offer, I think it's really important. So yeah, thanks. Amanda, you were recently appointed president of COMMB, and before that, you were the chief data tech officer for Frontrunner. So the evolving space that we're in, obviously things are changing. There's proliferation of ad tech and different applications within our industry that really has an impact on the talent that we need to cultivate to fill these needs. So in your new role, from sort of a holistic industry point of view, do you see an impact or opportunity for women when it comes to these changes?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because I often get asked to give my perspective as a woman in tech.
Yeah.
I'm a coder by education as well as a marketer by education. So it's a weird blend, and it's a rare sort of skill set to have a woman who is like super technically inclined, technically apt. But I think it's a really exciting opportunity, and there's so many women who are coming up and who are just super excited, super stoked on, the holistic technology and emerging tech space, emerging platforms. From a positioning standpoint and new roles, new opportunities, I think there's going to be a huge focus on data lakes, data analytics. I think there's going to be a bit of a division between holistic data analytics as well as sort of, research analytics. So I think there's going to be a break and an opportunity to have more of a research focus, more of a back-end focus on the analytics versus it just being sort of lumped into one category as an analytics component. I think there's going to be huge opportunity from a strategic standpoint for a lot of senior roles to come out that have the strategy for how we're leveraging data as organizations, as businesses, as corporations. What is the strategy for our data usage? Right now, I think the focus currently is on privacy. So we've got a lot of legal focus in terms of how we're leveraging certain aspects of data. But I think post the focus on legal, it's certainly going to expand on the strategy. So we've got the legal under control, so we're totally compliant. What are we doing from a strategy standpoint? How are we leveraging this data for revenue generation, for growth, for attribution, for client-focused ROI? So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities with respect to strategy of data usage with respect to analytics and insights, and that could be broken up into a number of different categories, whether it's on the like truly like DevOps side of analytics, or whether it's on the research and marketing side of analytics. But I certainly think that there's a ton of opportunity. And I personally just want to shout out to Michele, because she's been a huge mentor to me throughout my career. So when she was talking about succession plans and whatnot, those are conversations when I worked with Michele at OUTFRONT that we were having, and I'm so grateful to have that in my career. So I echo that sentiment, that it's incredibly valuable.
That's great. It's a real life example of exactly what we were just talking about.
It really is. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, that's super interesting with regards to data strategy, and you know, as one of the important emerging roles to pay attention to. I completely agree. I see that happening, and it's you know, it's a big part of the conversations that we have internally too, that we're looking towards. And you know, I think interestingly too, it's you know, it's not a skill set that you necessarily like. There's a lot of hands-on learning that needs to occur, and I think that ties in well with the piece around mentoring and developing leadership. They go hand in hand, right? Because you're not necessarily going to come out of school with the skills to tackle or the experience to tackle those kinds of emerging roles, but they're going to become more and more important and take up a lot more space and provide opportunities for growth as the industry is changing. So
it's a very critical component. And I think that, to your point, Edith, you don't come out of university or college with the skill set and the business understanding. Like, you get into business and you discover sort of the use cases of data and technology and emerging technology, and then your curiosity sort of leads you down the path of exploration of new technologies and emerging technologies. And then, you know, as a strategist, you become more aware and can add that sort of value with respect to guiding an organization into the right path to leverage specific data sets. And so I think there's huge opportunity to come from a role standpoint. And I would love to see more women in tech. I think it's fantastic. Where are my fellow nerds?
Well, I think, you know, putting examples, you know, and being more vocal about successful women in tech too is inspiring for anybody who has the chance to watch this too. So it certainly makes it more welcoming. And I'm just gonna pivot to Natalia, who's a great example of exactly also what you're talking about, Amanda, because Natalia is one of our own rising stars, and I also just recently learned that she also has a bachelor's degree in computer science as well, and has been you know, forging out her skills in leadership and managing accounts, working closely with the OUTFRONT team and many other key accounts. So Natalia, hi.
Thank you.
You've been working with, you know, big publishers across multiple markets and building out our account management function at Broadsign more formally throughout the year. And it's been a tough year. It's been a global pandemic. And you've done an amazing job at pulling this off and reporting it back to the rest of the company in a coherent, clear way. And you've been doing this while taking care of 2 young children during the pandemic with a husband who also works outside the home. So I kind of want to hone in on that and get your thoughts on, you know, what are some of the strategies that you used to cope this year, you know, being full-time mom and full-time on Zoom.
Thanks, Edith. Yes, it was quite a challenge, I'm not gonna lie, especially at the beginning of the pandemic when everybody had to adapt so fast to the new reality. It was tough for the kids, it was tough for the adults, for people with families, for people without families living alone. So I think we all agree it was challenging for everyone. For me personally, I was suddenly working full time while taking care of my 2 kids at home, who were 5 and 7 years old. or 3 pets, 2 dogs and a cat. And I was by myself. I was alone all day with them because my husband took on a new important project from the government precisely about COVID, and he had to go to work at the hospital every single day, including some weekends. So I was definitely overwhelmed, but there were a few things that helped me stay sane and go through it. The most important one being support. Support from my boss and Broadsign. I was never told you have to do this or you have to finish this by this day. On the contrary, I was given the tools and I felt I was trusted. I was told, do what you can. And it actually encouraged me to give my best to my family, to my work, to the clients. It was crazy timing also because we had a new team member. We had Amy joining the team and she had to onboard remotely. Her very first day at the job was when the pandemic officially started and the office closed. So she was amazing. She is amazing. She was able to learn super fast, to dive right in and help right away. And Christian joined the team too later in the summer. So I felt moral support from friends, from my groups of girlfriends, you know, women supporting each other, from family, from colleagues. There were actually a few great Slack channels that got created at Broadsign, home office with kids and critters for the pet, where people would share tips and ideas on what to do with the kids, share pictures, videos, jokes, and it was just so refreshing to see that you were not alone. And I remember I saw someone, and I believe it was you, Edith, shared a schedule that they had created for their kids. Yeah. And that actually was super helpful. So another strategy I would say was to try to be as organized as possible. I set up a routine for the kids at home, and I actually bought a printer. Every night I would prepare for the next day. I was selecting what activities and homeworks the kids could do by themselves and focus on while I was on my Zoom calls. And there were days when they were great and they cooperated, but there were days when it was just so stressful because they would suddenly start fighting and I was in the middle of my client call. So on that note, I did receive support from the clients too. Many of them also have their kids at home and they completely understood the interruptions and we were all on the same boat. So all that to say that I knew I was not alone and that there were people out there actually going through way harder things than me, really. And we were healthy, we had each other, we had our jobs. I just had to keep it together. And so I took the time I needed to be there for my family, to make up work time at night when they were asleep. And sorry, I'm extending too much, but
no, that's fine. And it's really interesting because I relate to everything you just said, like the schedule and reinventing the schedule, and some days were good and some days were terrible, and we got through it, and I also found that really helpful that we had that access to one another on those Slack channels and seeing that we could do that. But also even outside the company, like the fact that we're connecting on Zoom, there's a ironically, it's impersonal because we're not in person, but it's more personal too. And people stopped apologizing after a while for interruptions from their children. And I thought, and I sort of always try to extend, an okay for anybody that I felt the need to apologize. Like, no, don't apologize. This is the world that we're in, and we're all in the same boat. Like, we don't need to pretend that that's not what's going on, right? So I found that helpful. So thanks for sharing that, Natalia. Michele, from your side, how did you see the pandemic affect the workforce, either at OUTFRONT or in our industry? Do you see an impact more on women? What are your thoughts around that?
Thanks. I felt particularly for the young parents with young children who were trying to homeschool while also doing work. My son's 27, so I didn't have that particular issue, and so certainly on the team. I think within OUTFRONT, I found the impact was, I think, fairly evenly distributed in terms of, that we had young parents. And I agree, one of the things I loved is we did kind of get to meet everyone's children and dogs and see their living rooms and kitchens and all of that fun stuff. So, you know, I did think that in some ways we came closer together. And, you know, while it's not an in-person meeting, it certainly has made a phone call archaic. You know, I had somebody set up an audio only call the other day. I was like, I can't communicate with you. I can't see you. This is, you know, this is crazy. So, you know, that was, so I think, you know, within OUTFRONT Canada, I don't think women were hit harder than the men. Maybe someone would correct me on that, but yeah, I think I referenced earlier, very involved with Fred Victor, which is an organization trying to overcome homelessness in Toronto. And they put out a great piece on Monday. I shared it on my LinkedIn and saw some wonderful comments, I think, from a couple people, which is great on that. But it was very powerful, and it was one of the things that made me really reflect on, you know, this week, women. So I'm a bit isolated in OUTFRONT Canada, but it was identifying that because there are still more women in service roles, fast food, restaurants, things like that, they were impacted with the shutdown more or disproportionately to men, and the intake or needs being asked of Fred Victor increased for women, and that it's going to take a little longer for women to recover from the impact of the pandemic. So I think that that's something to be, you know, very aware of. I found we did have people having to decision on who would shoulder, you know, most of the home schooling within the company. And I did have, am I on topic with this?
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, sorry, Edith. You
That's fine.
You know me, I wander. So I did this past year, for the first time, I actually had more men on the company team on paternity leave than women on maternity leave.
Really?
And I flagged that with the US. They, you know, our maternity policies aren't necessarily so popular anyway in Canada. However, I thought it was interesting because what I saw was decisioning happening in terms of, in most cases, the decision was made, whoever's career could maybe be parked for a period of time, or who had the lower income took leave. And in our company anyway, that meant that in more cases, there were men that went on paternity leave. And I thought, well, how wonderful is that? You know, that's equality when the decisioning is not based on gender. So a lot of this, you know, I think in terms of the path forward, what is happening to kind of accommodate what were formerly considered women issues is now something that is a benefit to everyone, men and women. And that's when this really takes off, because, you know, when you put in place policies that everyone benefits from, you get full, everyone embracing it. And I think that creates a culture where it's moved from women's issues to just part of the culture. And I love that. I hope that can happen everywhere.
Yeah. That's so good to hear. I love that that stat from OUTFRONT. And, you know, interestingly, that was kind of what enabled me to succeed in my career to date also. I have two children, age 6 and 12, and in both cases, my husband shared the parental leave with me, like almost half. And that was, you know, it made a huge difference in my ability to propel forward in what we were working on at the time. And it was just a decision based on pragmatism and not, you know, social norms. And so it's really, really great to hear that, you know, we're starting to see more of that. It just makes a lot of sense. It gives families more opportunities to, you know, be flexible and capitalize on where the potential growth can come from. And it gives employers more opportunities to, you know, allow that flexibility for employees that they need to grow their careers. So that's fantastic. I wanted to come back to you, Amanda. In our industry overall, at the beginning we talked about this, you know, it's interesting because there's a bit of a shortage of women at the helm of publisher companies. But we've done really well in the industry associations. Many of them are led by women at the very top, and you're a great example of that. Why do you think that is?
When I read this question, I thought it was such an interesting observation, because it is very accurate from an observation and a statement perspective. I think a lot of the associations are female-led globally, because there's a lot of marketers at the helm of these associations. And if you look at the historical gender sort of displacement of marketing as a career, the bulk of marketers tend to be female. And so when I looked at this, I was like, oh, I need to do a bit of research, because, you know, it's an accurate statement, but why is this? And I think that was sort of the consensus that I came to with respect to a lot of our associations combine measurements and research and marketing together. We've got the OAAA, we've got Geopath. While they exist separately, at the end of the day, measurements and marketing kind of go hand in hand. So, you know, the ladies at the helm, Kim and team at Geopath, and Anna at the OAAA, it's just like a really great example of how you can pivot your career from like traditional marketing into something that's more like industry and strategically led. From a global perspective,
I might weigh in on that one, Amanda, when you give me the nod, because I know why I wanted to
jump in. You can jump in.
I can jump in. Okay. Yeah. Well, one, I've been trying to get Amanda back on team OUTFRONT for as soon as she left. So I thought, well, if I can't have her, at least make sure she's working in the industry. So that was easy. She's amazing, as we all know.
Thank you.
So I think part of it, yes, I agree with you, you know, coming out through marketing, but I also think, you know, our definition of leadership is changing, and we're seeing that. And so, you know, I think that there is now acknowledgement that some qualities that were previously seen as being, you know, female are now powerful strengths to have in a leadership role. And those include, you know, collaboration and empathy. And so, you know, I'm so happy that the perception of an effective leader has moved from, you know, this, you know, historical sort of, I'm going to say dictator type person to someone who, you know, is more collaborative. There's the whole, you know, lead from behind or you know, collaborate with your team. And I think that the organizational leadership needs that in particular, because, you know, poor Amanda, I mean, she's got to collaborate or bring, it's like herding cats. You know, she's got me, Astral, Pattison, like everybody, and try and get us on the same page. So, you know, her ability to demonstrate empathy and collaborative skills is critical. And similarly, you know, I wasn't a shoo-in for the role when it came down to, because I asked after they told me I had it, because you don't ask why, you know, before, because you're selling yourself. So don't do that, you know, but after I said, like, you know, what tipped it, because it was me and someone else who wasn't a woman. But anyway, they said, well, they thought because we'd just gone through, you were in the middle of this big acquisition, a collaborative approach, you know, empathy, bringing two very different cultures and teams together played to what they saw as a strength I had. And I thought, okay, yes. So anyway, I would say that was part of it. And
I think that's a huge point as well. Like, not to diminish any gender bias at all, but females tend to have more patience when it comes to collaboration and, you know, challenges within opinions. So I think that it is a very critical component. And as an association leader, specifically from a global perspective and from a, you know, Canadian perspective, we're literally, as Michele said, herding cats. Like, I'm not only dealing with the operator side and their competitive needs to differentiate, but I'm dealing with the agency side and their needs for, you know, consistency. So it's like two different, entirely complete opposite needs that we have to sort of bring together. So collaboration, patience, empathy, which typically tend to be more the female-oriented traits is probably a good reason why a lot of the association leaders globally are female.
I kind of hope the answer would go in that direction. I suspected that might be a factor, and I think that's really
Yeah.
and yeah, it's kind of an inherent skill set that's becoming more part of, like you said, Michele, part of a more traditional definition of leadership, or a more commonly accepted requirement for leadership, which is a phenomenal opportunity, really. And speaking of leadership, back to you, Natalia. Are there some experiences or elements within our industry and your experience in particular that you can point to that you'd like to see improve to make it more welcoming for women to move into those leadership roles?
I mean, I love everything that has been shared so far, and I think if we want to see continuous improvement, it should start from the roots, the values that are taught at home, when boys learn and see that girls are treated the same, that girls are equally strong and capable of doing anything, no matter the gender. As we're saying, a child should grow knowing that they can do anything they set their mind to. So within the organizations, giving women the opportunity to step into leadership roles, giving flexibility with the schedule so we can balance family, work life, encouraging setting clear career goals and empowering with the right tools so that we can grow and achieve those goals. The mentorship and coaching programs led by women that can share their experiences and who we can learn from. So I have to say that I feel Broadsign is a really good, positive environment and does have great, smart and strong women in the leadership team. And I think it's encouraging to see that for the rest of the female employees. And actually, congratulations again to Kai and Megan for their promotion. So other great examples.
Yeah, that's great.
Can I just want to, there's a good comment in the chat room, and I like it because one of the things, yeah, I think that the great thing right now is that we do, I hope, make sure that opportunities are available to anyone. So just best skills for the role. So I feel I didn't get the job because I'm a woman. I also did not get the job because I'm a woman. It just was the best fit for what the role required at that time. And that felt really good because I had previously left a company because I thought I was being promoted, you know, because they wanted to promote a woman and I wasn't, you know, empowered to do the job and it didn't feel right. I don't like that. So, you know, now really, I think the win is just making sure that it's open and that we're considering all the possibilities. On a call with the US where they had a women panel, a question came in, I think from one of the men on our team, what could men do to, you know, try and help, you know, the cause? And we kind of collectively agreed that the main thing is just making sure that there's an openness when we're recruiting and promoting, and that you check any kind of thoughts about who might come to. And so I think recruitment in HR is critical. So one of the things we realize we're trying to make sure we avoid is allowing anybody to kind of go, oh, I know a person, let me hire this person. You say, no, we've got to open it up, because if you don't open it up, then you just start having, you know, the same kind of person, because your network going to be like you, which is a critical change. So whenever we're recruiting, and I've caught some people say, oh, you know, particularly in the area we're talking about, tech.
Yeah.
You know, you can hear, you know, I'll hear in a conversation, oh, it's going to be a guy. Said, let's consider the possibility it might be a woman. So, you know, anyway.
Oh, that's a great.
Yeah,
exactly.
I totally saw that same comment, Michele, and I responded back saying I 100% agree, because it's not about gender, and I understand, you know, we're focused right now on you know, women empowerment and female empowerment because it is International Women's Week, and I love that. I'm so stoked about it. There is an underrepresentation of women in tech, for sure. I don't necessarily think that's intentional by any means. I just think by nature, you know, more males go into computer programming than females, and I echo the sentiment where it's look at the holistic vision of the organization and examine the candidates who are coming forward, examine the positions and the soft skills and hard skills that are needed for each and every role, and just find the best fit. Do we want to see more women in tech? Totally. That's going to take, you know, a lot of females to go to college and university for programming. But I think that the stigma of it being more of a male dominated industry has really been lifted over the past years. Like, technology has become the cool new industry, and a lot of people want to be involved in that. And I think that that's so empowering, and it's really exciting to see.
That's a really great point. You know, when I talk to my daughters about what their ambitions are, they can't even conceive of an industry that doesn't involve tech. So all their ambitions involve some form of tech, which I think is, you know, really reflective of where we're heading, and you know, makes me excited about those kinds of opportunities. And you know, you guys answered pretty much one of the questions that was submitted in terms of what are some ways that male colleagues can further support and empower their female teammates. You kind of spoke to that. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add on that point in terms of within your own teams. If anything comes to mind, please jump in.
Yeah. I think, you know, the balance is good. I like having balance, and, you know, over the past couple of years, you know, there's been the odd opportunity to speak, and I go back to everybody asked the men too, like, is it different, you know, just because I'm a woman? And you know, they all say, well, it's not because you're a woman, it's because you're you. And I think, okay, that I like that feels good. But I think within that, you know, there are certain things, whenever I get into a situation where it's not balanced, I find, you know, sometimes then there's a way of speaking, or you know, the dominant culture is going to take over. And so, you know, if it's all women, things can go in a certain direction. I start to see the men kind of get a little uncomfortable, maybe. And then the same thing happens when it's all men, you know. Yeah. And so I like balance. And I think as we've come through, I remember, you know, when I worked at a radio company for a while and was promoted, and it became, you know, the only woman on the exec team there. And I thought, oh, you know, how's this going to go? But the GM said, oh, I'm so glad, because now they're not going to talk about sports and all this stuff, because I have no interest in that either. And I went, oh, okay, fantastic. You know, but so I think that balance is good, and the recruitment's important, holding ourselves accountable. You know, I have an HR team that challenges me. I sat down, we went through the review on pay equity, et cetera. We do that, you know, every year. And yeah, I had my head of HR say, well, you know, we have to make sure that we're not underpaying women in the same category. And I'm like, who you talk to? But yeah, I'm as accountable on that front as anybody else. We have to make sure, you know, equal pay. Yeah. So I love that my head of HR doesn't assume that I don't have any issues that are there. Yeah. So yeah,
being open to it and checking. That's great.
Yep.
This has been wonderful. We're already at the top of the hour. I'm really delighted to have had you all join us for this really important conversation. Thank you so much. It's time for us to wrap it up. So thank you, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you
for having us.
Thanks. Thanks very much.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.